The tides aren't turning anymore. They've seemingly turned. The media is changing their rhetoric so completely it's hard to trust any part of it any more than another attempt to confuse and create cognitive dissonance in us all until we stoop into some kind of compliance. It's like a screenwriter is trying out a new plot twist, or like a storyline is being called in from some detached director someplace out there. The swiftness at which they abruptly change and change all of it, the narrative, I mean. CNN saying now as if it makes all the sense in the world what many of us have been saying all along, but being canceled or chastised within inches of our existence for saying it. Masks are no more to be mandated, they say. The science has changed. No need to mandate them. A new term, one-way masking, is being introduced as a viable option. The propaganda is shifting before our eyes, and one-way masking is fine if you feel safer still wearing one, and many do out here in Brooklyn. They walk alone outside, the cloth still covering their face, breathing in their own CO2, limiting the flow of oxygen. No one else even close to them, and still they cover their faces as if it's become a symbol of allegiance to a particular in-group. More than making any sense, which it doesn't, it's a sign that you're a good person, not one of the bad ones who resisted complying to another thing that didn't really make sense, another thing that seemed to have a dark undertone to it, a spirit of control. That was always looming around every decision, a spirit, and not a nice one, not one that felt like it had anyone's best interest in mind. I think some people are tuned into life on that level more so than others, and that's why some of us couldn't go along with much of any of it right from the beginning. For us, there was always something off about it. And if you dug a little, it wasn't difficult to see that it didn't add up, that what was being sold to us as science was actually the opposite of that. The devil works with two truths and a lie. And two truths and a lie was how nearly all of it, their rhetoric, got by. And now, 2 years or more later, you have people walking in Brooklyn by themselves, not even around anybody, still breathing into masks, covering their face. They can't possibly think there's something dangerous in the air that's going to get them at this point. No one is even saying that. We have so many examples of the so-called elite putting masks on for photo ops and then abruptly taking them off. We've seen that image hundreds of times, if not thousands. And also so-called elites in box seats at sporting events or parties, maskless, as if nothing at all was wrong in the world, because they know nothing at all is. They know it's the same as it ever was. Life is always a risk. The biggest risk is trying to avoid all of risk, apparently. Interestingly, LA trying to hold on to mask mandates even as they prepare to host hundreds of thousands of people for the Super Bowl. And these things that don't add up and never did, nudging people as the narrative shifts. The current variant, widely regarded as mild and ultra contagious, which is a good thing to induce herd immunity. The real science is clear that everyone will get it and the overwhelming majority will recover, and then herd immunity will be achieved, and no shot will stop that from happening, or mask, or anything else. So it's back to the same as it ever was, surrender to life, which has always been full of risk, which has always had the possibility of sickness and death. There is no way to avoid those things. And you don't do yourself or anyone any favors attempting to. And now certain people are holding on to the mask. They like the division. It's given them purpose and a group to belong to, and another group to despise. And when life is framed that way, it's easier to ignore the really complicated matters of being human. Questions about lack of purpose, about not having a passion to cling to. Those things disappear temporarily when you can be deemed righteous by covering your face and demanding children do the same. The children being traumatized by all this in ways we probably can't imagine, but in ways we will be facing for many years to come. And just like that, the very programs that told them all to cover their faces all the time are saying they don't have to do that anymore. The very programs that said everyone has to get the shots no matter what, no choice is allowed in the matter, are now saying it should be everyone's choice. Essentially, what they are saying now is what we have been saying all along, and their caveat or acknowledgement of a turnaround is that the science has changed. And all that would be fine. All that would be fine if they hadn't demonized us as subhuman, immoral monsters for saying exactly what they are saying now. We saw the Spirit then, and we see it now. Though they are saying basically exactly what we hoped they would say all along, what seemed obvious to us, namely that all this should be a personal choice, that you can't coerce or force people into medical experimentation without seeming monstrous to many of us. And though they are now saying it's all about personal choice, their about face is so extreme it's hard to trust. I wonder how the person, still all these years later, walking alone in Brooklyn with his face covered, struggling to get oxygen, I wonder what he thinks his TV gods are telling him a new story now, what he thinks about it. But his mind is broken from the trauma of these years, and to him, that face covering is impossible to let go of. The face covering has become his identity. It's a symbol now of a broken mind walking alone in Brooklyn with a bag over your face when nothing is out to get you, when there is nothing in the air that is being sent to knock you off the planet. It's the same as it ever was, and in many ways, it's never been any different. We saw a comedian collapse on stage during a bit where she was bragging about taking all the shots and nothing bad happening to her. She said, "Jesus must love me," and then fell, fracturing her skull. I hope she gets well soon. There's no gloating here, but it's just pointing out some wildness. The media reporting it as dehydration. On top of that, reports came out that that's what killed Bob Saget, a similar fall. TMZ reporting brain bleed after hitting his head as the culprit. May he rest in peace. I had a friend who lost consciousness recently multiple times and now has a pacemaker as an attempt to prevent that from happening again. Strange occurrences. Maybe it has nothing to do with the thing, but being reported more and more, and yet you can't suggest what we all think it possibly could be. You can't suggest that out loud. But I can't help wonder if the sudden change in the rhetoric doesn't have something to do with these occurrences being reported more frequently. Losing control of the narrative and seeing how suspicion will grow as occurrences like these will continue. They've been unsuccessful at shutting down Joe Rogan, at shutting down the human spirit, at shutting off our minds. They see that we won't comply anymore. And they know a storm is coming. They know more evidence will fall. Canadian truckers turning Canada into the benchmark for freedom where it once stood as a fallen symbol of oppression. I suppose they see where we are and see where it's going and are joining our side to escape from the burning building, like one of those movies where the bank robbers pretend to be hostages so they can escape. The very ones that have been holding us hostage are now turning to us and saying, "Hey, that was messed up, am I right?" And we are supposed to pretend that they've been saying that all along. And still, a broken man walks in Brooklyn with a mask over his face, breathing CO2, confused about what any of it means.